Hello, my name is Terry Stanley. I'm an instructor here in the General Education Department at UMA, specifically in the sciences, and I want to take a little bit of time to explain characteristics of living organisms and biodiversity and how important this is to all of us, and specifically, of course, those of us studying in the field of biology. First off, let's look at life and life on Earth. And all life has specific characteristics, and those characteristics are identifiable and repeatable, basically meaning that for something to be considered living, it's going to have some specific things that it's going to have to meet or characteristics that it's going to have to meet. But not all life is the same. We have great diversity of living organisms throughout the world, in all habitats and all environments, from the depths of the oceans to the tops of the trees and into the sky. On this slide, I wanted to turn your attention to the illustration, which is the Encyclopedia of Life. And this is a wonderful website that was kind of like the brainchild of a very well-known naturalist called E.O. Wilson. And he basically wanted to have a repository where scientists and maybe just a naturalist at heart, maybe they don't have a science degree or anything, but just a naturalist at heart could go and gather information about all the diversity of life. And of course, that's a massive undertaking. And when you get a chance, explore this website. You would be amazed at what's at this website, the content that's there, and again, the diversity of life. So one of the things that is really important in looking at life on Earth is what do all life have in common, and what do they have that's different that enables us to have life with certain characteristics as well as diversity. So for example, a worm, a human, a plant, a mushroom, all of those different types of life have are very diverse, but they have some characteristics in common. And again, that website, eol.org, Encyclopedia of Life, it's just in its rudimentary stages, if you will, of collecting information on all of the diversity of life that's out there. So what makes something living? Again, that goes back to the characteristics, but all life has levels of organization that are considered to be successive, or basically they build upon each other. So a living organism consists of cells that are organized into certain patterns, tissues, that then organize into systems that make the organism. But those cells consist of molecules that are made up of atoms. So if you look at the illustration presented on the slide, it doesn't matter what you're looking at, what substance, whether it's living or non-living. You're going to have atoms as the fundamental building block, which organize into molecules. And then when you get into living organisms, those molecules organize to form cells. And a cell is considered to be the basic unit of life. It's the basic unit of structure and function upon which a living organism is built. And some organisms are, in fact, just unicellular. Think of an amoeba, paramecium, those are protists. Think of E. coli, that's a common bacteria that a lot of people know that is unicellular. So individual cells can be a living organism in and of themselves, but then they can organize into tissues, which then organize into organs, and then systems, and then, of course, an entire organism. Think of the complexity of humans, us, and we are made up of multiple systems with multiple organs and tissue types. Those organisms then make up populations of individuals, which then create communities that exist in ecosystems and they interact with their environment. And then as we pull away to the entirety of all life, we get to the biosphere, which includes all of the ecosystems on Earth that consist of all of the communities that interact with their environment. So as something grows and develops and advances in its characteristics of life, new properties emerge. To be considered living, again, there are certain characteristics that one must have. They have to be able to acquire and use energy and nutrients. They have to have a way of sensing their environment, whether it's an internal or external environment. And what's the good of sensing something if you can't respond to it? So there's an internal change in a cell inside of an organism's body. Well, it's pointless, if you will, if there's not some type of response to that change. Or if there's a stimulus external to the organism. What's the organism going to do about that? How is it going to respond to that stimulus? And then growing and reproducing. Organisms have to be able to grow in size, grow in adaptation, and reproduce, make more of their own kind so that they can continue with their lineage and continue that specific type of organism. So let's take each one of those for a few minutes. Organisms requiring energy and nutrients. Energy is needed for all activities, whether they are activities in a living organism or not. We know that there is potential energy, the ability to do something, and then there's kinetic energy. Basically, you are doing that something. So organisms need energy for all of their activities, for them to be able to eat, for them to be able to digest, for them to be able to respond to their environment, for them to be able to reproduce. Without energy, they wouldn't be able to interact. They wouldn't be able to basically survive or to live. Now, where they get this energy from depends upon the type of organism that they are. If they are autotrophs or photosynthesizers, they take the photons, the energy of sunlight, and they have the ability to convert that into chemical energy that they can then use. So something like a rose bush has the ability to take the energy from photons of light and convert it into carbon-based substances by taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and the energy of light and combining that carbon with other atoms, specifically oxygen and hydrogen, to form sugars. Those sugars are then the building blocks upon which all other molecules within the organism are built. So for example, if you kind of look at a seed, like an acorn, and then you look at an entire oak tree, how did this little itty bitty acorn turn into this huge oak tree over time? What does it have that gives it that ability? And in essence, it has the ability to take the energy from light and convert it into chemical energy that it then uses to build its cells, its tissues, its roots, its stems, its leaves, and so forth. They also need nutrient, and that nutrient comes from recycling within the ecosystems. So, for example, that oak tree that we're talking about, it's going to use the energy from sunlight and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to fix the carbon from the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into a usable sugar. But for its cells to be able to do all of that, they have to contain other chemicals. And where they get those other chemicals from are from the ground, through the roots, up through the stems, and then to the leaves. And those are the nutrients. So think of fertilizer in that instance. Potassium, phosphates, nitrogens, and so forth. If you look at us, we're going to get our energy for all of our activities from taking what we eat, digesting it, turning it into raw materials, as well as energy. And as we turn it into raw materials, those in essence become our nutrients. Organisms also sense and respond to stimulation, whether that is a stimulus that is inside of the organism or one outside of the organism. And if an organism didn't have the ability to respond to a stimulus, it wouldn't have the ability to adapt. It wouldn't have the ability to change. It wouldn't have the ability to grow, to go towards a stimulus, away from a stimulus. Many individuals think of this as kind of the nervous system. Although not all living organisms have a nervous system, they do all have the ability to respond to stimuli, to then promote changes that then should be beneficial to them and their survival. Organisms grow and reproduce. So on this screen, this picture is double-stranded DNA, which is our hereditary material. This is the foundation for not all, but the vast majority of living organisms. All living organisms have some form of nucleic acid as a foundation, an informational molecule, if you will. And most of them, that informational molecule is DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid. For some, it could be ribonucleic acid or RNA. And what this strand of atoms does is it enables the cell to know what to do. So it is a blueprint of instruction for the cell. Chemically speaking, it's going to take amino acids that have come into the organism as a nutrient, and it is going to order them based upon the directions that it gives. So, for example, some of my DNA is going to take some of my amino acids and make the protein amylase so that I can digest starches into sugars when I eat, so that I can then absorb those sugars into my bloodstream and rearrange them, store them, break them down into energy, basically utilize them. Of course, growing deals with the genetic material, and it deals with the genetic material in the sense of adding to the genetic material. And what I mean by that is one cell can become 2 cells, can become 4 cells, and so forth and so on. So you're adding to your cellular content as you replicate your genetic material. And there are very distinct processes that are required for this, for organisms to be able to add cellular content. And then, of course, on the grand scale, reproduce. An organism needs to reproduce its own kind. If it's a unicellular organism, it's going to reproduce more of its own cells through a process known as mitosis. If it's a complex organism like us, it's going to reproduce through sexual reproduction. So it's going to make gametes through the process of meiosis, a sperm and an egg, that then join through a process called fertilization to form a zygote, which becomes the embryo, or in essence, the new offspring. When we look at biodiversity, we look at how things differ. So take all the information that I just went over, if you will, and let's break it into all of these living things have all of those characteristics, but yet not all of them are identical. So right now on the screen, you can see what prokaryotes look like, that they are unicellular and they belong to either bacteria or archaea. And then here we can see eukaryotes, and that they are either protists, small single-celled organisms like you can see on the screen. Fungi, think of a mushroom. Plant, think of an oak tree. Animal, think of us. So although we all have similar things in common, we do have a great deal of diversity, and that's known as biodiversity. So I want to thank you for listening to this video. As you reflect on these topics of characteristics of living things and biodiversities, and as you work within your course, use the videos, use the interactives, research on your own. Go to the UMA library to integrate this information into your discussions and your learning for your assignments and your assessments. Again, I want to thank you for your time, and I hope this video has been helpful.